All right, so today we're diving into queer female rappers in Spain. We found this fascinating discussion from the Madam Talk Europe podcast. They had a queer rapper along with a few experts on gender equality in Spanish music.
Yeah, a really cool mix of perspectives. Like you've got artists, industry people, academics all kind of weighing in.
And he gets right into it,
Yeah.
the challenges and the opportunities these musicians face. But the thing that really jumped out to me right away was the lack of data. The podcast host, Éloïse Bouton, she's also the founder of Madam Rap, she points out that there's like no official stats on queer female rappers in Spain.
It's wild, right? Almost like they're invisible to the industry.
Totally, like they're working in this vacuum.
Well, and Madam Rap actually compiled a list. It's about 140 queer rappers in Spain and something like 350 across Latin America. But yeah, without official numbers, it's hard to get a real sense of their presence.
Yeah, and that lack of data makes you wonder, is there more we're missing? Is this part of a bigger problem?
Totally a good question. I think it connects to the whole issue of sexism in the music industry, which is a theme that comes up a lot in this episode.
You're sure?
Cuba, the rapper they interviewed, she puts it really bluntly. She says, everything in this world is tinted by sexism and racism.
Yeah, she's so real. It's eye-opening to hear her talk about her experiences with, like, what she calls cool racism, even in spaces that are supposed to be inclusive.
Oh, yeah, that's such an interesting concept.
Can you talk about it a little more?
Yeah, so basically it's like, these subtle forms of prejudice that often slip under the radar. The kind of racism that disguises itself as acceptance, which makes it even more insidious.
Oh, totally. It's like a wolf in sheep's clothing. Makes you really rethink what real inclusion actually means. So how do the other guests on the podcast respond to that? To Cuba's experiences, I mean. Laura Alcazar and Elena Bricio.
Well, they each have their own insights into the whole sexism thing. Laura Alcazar argues that we need to move beyond quotas and focus on actual integration and non-exclusion.
Right. It's not just about checking boxes.
Exactly. It needs to be a real shift in the culture.
For sure.
And, Alcazar makes this point that really stuck with me. It's that genuine integration is about creating an environment where women and queer artists not only have a seat at the table, but their voices are actually heard and valued.
So how does the Spanish rap scene compare to other music scenes?
That's interesting. Alcazar compares Spain to the US and UK. And she suggests that the Spanish scene has been particularly dominated by white men, especially since the early 2000s.
So you have to wonder if it's harder for queer female rappers to make it in Spain then. What about Cuba? Does her experience back that up?
Definitely. She talks very openly about facing racism and limited opportunities, which, really shows the personal effects of this systemic bias.
For sure. So when people say there's no audience for female rappers, does this podcast push back on that at all?
Elena Bricio has a really compelling counter-argument. She suggests that because Spanish rap is so politically charged, it might not be as appealing to mainstream audiences. Not that the audience isn't there, it's more that they haven't been exposed to it.
That makes you think about the industry's role in shaping taste.
It really does. Are they underestimating the audience's desire for something different, something a little more challenging?
Right. And then there's Cuba's comment about mainstream hip-hop, how it sometimes reinforces negative stereotypes about racialized people.
Yeah, that's a tough one to swallow. It shows how a resistant art form can be co-opted and used to perpetuate the very systems it was meant to challenge.
It's almost like a betrayal, isn't it?
Totally.
Like they're taking away the political edge and just making it palatable for mass consumption.
Exactly.
And that really highlights why it's so important to support independent artists like Cuba, who put artistic integrity first.
Absolutely. But then it also makes you wonder, what kind of challenges do they face trying to maintain that integrity?
Let's get into that in part 2.
It's definitely not easy trying to balance artistic vision with, the financial realities. Cuba talks about that a lot, The struggle to stay true to yourself while also making a living.
It's such a tough spot to be in.
Well,
and then you add in the lack of support, like Laura Alcazar mentioned, the limited opportunities for female rappers in Spain.
Yeah, Alcazar really paints this picture of, how precarious those existing spaces are. A lot of them just don't have the resources, the infrastructure to help these artists reach a bigger audience.
It's almost like the mainstream scene is shutting them out.
Yeah.
But there are organizations working to change that, right? Like MIM.
Yeah, absolutely. Elena Bricio describes MIM. It stands for Mujeres de la Industria de la Música, and it's doing amazing work connecting female artists with the industry.
So they're like a bridge between talent and resources.
Yeah, exactly. They offer contacts, job opportunities, but also just a vital support network.
That's so important. It's great that they're actively trying to counter that dominant narrative.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not just limited to Spain either. They have this program called Inspire. It connects artists in Spain and Latin America.
Oh, wow. So they're fostering these international connections.
Yeah, exactly. Building solidarity across borders.
That's awesome. But even with all these positive initiatives, there's still this debate about quotas, right? Are they a necessary evil, or is there a better way to achieve real inclusion?
That's a great question. And Masta Cuba and Elena Briccio actually have different views on it, which I think is really helpful to hear. Masta Cuba expresses this desire for natural inclusion, where quotas wouldn't even be needed.
Yeah, that's a beautiful idea. But is it realistic in the current climate?
Right. And then Elena Briccio, on the other hand, she acknowledges that quotas can actually be effective in bringing about real change. She points to some of the positive shifts in Spain that have come about because of them.
So it's complex. No easy answers.
That's really not.
But I think the important thing is that we're having these conversations, challenging assumptions and looking for solutions.
I agree completely. We can't become complacent.
Exactly. And it's important to remember this isn't just about abstract ideas. We're talking about people's lives and careers.
Absolutely.
And speaking of which, I want to turn it over to you, our listeners. What are your thoughts on quotas? Do you see them as necessary for equality? Or do you think there are other ways to get there? Take a moment to think about that. As we head into the final part of our deep dive, this whole conversation about queer female rappers in Spain really makes you think about what a truly inclusive music industry would look like.
Yeah, it's a big question.
It's not just about adding a few more women or queer artists to the mix,
No,
right?
not at all. It's about changing the systems that have kept them out in the first place.
Like rebuilding the foundation while the house is still standing.
Exactly.
That's a pretty big challenge.
It's going to take a lot of work, for sure. We need to look at data collection representation, access to resources opportunities, and we can't forget about those subtle forms of discrimination, like that cool racism that Masta Cuba talked about.
Yeah, that really stuck with me. It's so easy to miss those subtle biases,
Yeah.
even in spaces that are trying to be progressive.
Right, we all have blind spots. It's our responsibility to recognize them and challenge them.
And it's not just about individual awareness either. It's about holding institutions accountable. Like Laura Alcazar said, we need to move beyond quotas and focus on real integration.
Absolutely. Quotas can be a good starting point, but they don't address the deeper cultural issues.
So what does genuine integration actually look like then?
Well, it's about a change in mindset, a willingness to share power and create space for marginalized voices, making sure that women and queer artists have a real say in shaping the industry.
And that's where organizations like IMIME are so important.
Totally. They're not just talking about change, they're actually making it happen.
Providing support, connections, opportunities.
Right. And their Inspire program is so cool, building bridges between Spain and Latin America.
It's like they're planting seeds for a more diverse and vibrant musical landscape.
And we all need to help those seeds grow. Artists, industry professionals, listeners, everyone.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a challenge. How can we each support and amplify the voices of marginalized artists?
Well, I think it starts with awareness. Learn about the systemic barriers that exist and how we might be contributing to them without even realizing it. Seek out music from diverse artists. Support independent labels and organizations that are promoting inclusivity. And most importantly, use your voice. Speak out against injustice and discrimination.
Be intentional with your choices. Amplify the voices that have been silenced. Help create a world where every artist, no matter their gender, sexuality, or background, has the chance to share their music with the world. Because music is a powerful thing. It connects us, inspires us, challenges us. It can help us build a better future. And that's definitely something worth fighting for.